The dusty streets of Apache Junction, Arizona Territory, seemed to shimmer with judgment as Clara Bennett walked past the general store in the spring of 1882. Her head held high despite the whispers that followed her like tumbleweeds caught in a desert wind. She had learned to ignore the sideways glances from the women clutching their husbands' arms tighter when she passed, the way conversations died the moment she entered a room. 6 months had passed since she had fled from the mining camp where her husband had died, leaving her with nothing but debts, and a reputation destroyed by lies spread by men who thought a young widow alone was fair game for their advances. When she had rejected them, they had retaliated the only way such men knew how, painting her as a woman of loose morals, suggesting she had driven her husband to drink with her unfaithful ways. None of it was true, but truth mattered little in a town where gossip spread faster than wildfire through dry brush. Clara pushed open the door to the boarding house where she rented a small room above the kitchen, the smell of fresh bread mixing with the ever-present dust that seemed to coat everything in the Arizona heat. Mrs. Patterson, the boarding house owner, gave her a curt nod. The elderly woman was one of the few who treated Clara with basic human decency, though even she kept their interactions brief and professional, unwilling to risk her own reputation by appearing too friendly with the town's outcast. The work Clara could find was scarce and backbreaking. She took in washing, scrubbed floors at the saloon in the early morning hours before the drunks stumbled out, and sometimes helped Mrs. Patterson prepare meals for the other boarders. It was barely enough to keep her fed and sheltered, but she refused to leave Apache Junction. She had nowhere else to go, no family willing to take her in, no money for a stage ticket to somewhere she might start fresh. Besides, running would look like an admission of guilt, and Clara Bennett had done nothing wrong except marry a man who turned out to be weaker than she had hoped and die in a place where widows were viewed with suspicion. That evening, as the sun painted the desert sky in shades of orange and purple, Clara carried a basket of clean laundry toward the saloon. The building stood at the far end of town, a 2-story structure that somehow managed to be both the most popular and most disreputable establishment in Apache Junction. She delivered her washing through the back entrance, collecting her meager payment from the bartender who barely looked at her, before turning back to polish glasses for the evening crowd. She was walking home, basket lighter but still clutched in her tired hands, when she nearly collided with a man stepping out of the telegraph office. He was tall, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that needed a trim, wearing the dust-covered clothes of someone who spent more time on the range than in town. What struck her most were his eyes, a surprising shade of light brown that seemed to take her in without the usual judgment or calculation she had grown accustomed to seeing. "Sorry, madam," he said, his voice low and sincere. He removed his worn hat, holding it against his chest in a gesture that seemed almost old-fashioned in its genuine courtesy. "I did not see you there." "No harm done," Clara replied, moving to step around him, expecting the conversation to end there as most did. But the man did not move aside immediately. Instead, he continued to look at her with something that might have been curiosity mixed with concern. "You are heading toward the boarding house. It is getting dark. May I walk with you?" Clara felt herself stiffen. She had learned that offers of help from men usually came with expectations attached, prices she would not pay. "I am fine on my own, thank you." Something flickered across his face, understanding perhaps, or maybe disappointment. He nodded once and stepped aside, allowing her to pass. "Evening, madam." She walked away quickly, feeling his gaze on her back but refusing to look behind her. It was only later, as she lay in her narrow bed listening to the sounds of the boarding house settling for the night, that she realized he had not looked at her the way other men did. There had been no assessment in his eyes, no calculation of what he might take from a woman the town had already deemed worthless. There had been only a simple, straightforward kindness that she barely remembered how to recognize. The next morning, Clara woke before dawn to begin her work at the saloon. The establishment needed to be cleaned before the first customers arrived, which meant she was scrubbing floors and wiping tables while most of the town still slept. She had just finished mopping the main room when the back door opened, and the same man from the previous evening stepped inside, this time accompanied by an older gentleman with silver hair and a badge pinned to his vest. "Miss," the sheriff said, tipping his hat to her, "this here is Austin Sawyer. He is taking over the old Riverside Ranch, about 10 miles northeast of town. Says he is looking to hire some help, and I thought of you." Clara straightened, brush still in her hand, soap water dripping onto the floor she had just cleaned. She looked between the two men, waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the real reason behind this offer to reveal itself. Austin Sawyer stepped forward, his hat once again in his hands. "The ranch has been neglected for some time. Previous owner died without heirs, and I purchased it through the bank. There is a small house on the property that needs a woman's touch, and I could use someone to help with cooking and general housekeeping. The work would be steady, with fair wages and respect. You would have your own quarters in the main house, separate and private, and I give you my word that you would be treated with nothing but proper decorum." The offer sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. Clara had learned that lesson the hard way. Why me? There are plenty of women in this town who would jump at such an opportunity. The sheriff cleared his throat. "That is just it, Miss Bennett. Most of the women in town are already married or living with family. Austin needs someone who can start immediately and who would not mind the isolation. The ranch is far enough out that it would mean staying there most of the time rather than traveling back and forth to town." Austin met her eyes directly, and once again she saw none of the usual predatory calculation she had come to expect. "I will be honest with you, madam. The sheriff told me about your situation, about how the town has treated you. I do not care about gossip, and I do not hold with judging people based on rumor. I need someone reliable who is not afraid of hard work. In return, I offer steady employment, decent wages, 3 meals a day, and a safe place to live. That is all, nothing more, nothing less." Clara wanted to believe him. Every instinct she had developed since her husband's death screamed at her to be cautious, to suspect ulterior motives, to protect herself. But another part of her, the part that was bone-tired from scrubbing floors and washing other people's clothes, the part that was slowly being ground down by judgment and isolation, wanted to take this chance. "How much are you offering?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Austin named a sum that was more than double what she currently made cobbling together various jobs around town. "Plus room and board, as I mentioned. And if you decide after a trial period that it does not suit you, I will pay you what you have earned and bring you back to town with no hard feelings." The sheriff nodded encouragingly. "Austin is a good man, Miss Bennett. Served in the cavalry before mustering out and deciding to try ranching. You would be safe with him." Clara looked down at her reddened, work-roughened hands, at the simple dress she wore that had been mended so many times she could barely remember what the original fabric looked like. She thought about her small room above the boarding house kitchen, about the whispers that followed her everywhere, about the endless struggle just to survive day after day in a town that had already condemned her. "When would you need me to start?" she asked quietly. A smile touched Austin's face, transforming his serious features into something warmer. "Tomorrow, if you are willing, I have a wagon outside. We could load your belongings and head out to the ranch before the heat of the day sets in." It was happening too fast, but Clara found herself nodding. What did she have to lose, really? Her reputation was already destroyed. If this man turned out to be no different from the others, at least she would be away from the constant judgment of Apache Junction. And if, by some miracle, he was telling the truth, she might finally have a chance at something resembling a decent life. "I will do it," she said. "Give me a few hours to gather my things and settle my account with Mrs. Patterson." Austin's smile widened. "I will bring the wagon around to the boarding house at 8 o'clock. And Miss Bennett, thank you. You will not regret this, I promise you." Clara was not sure she believed in promises anymore, but she nodded and watched as the two men left through the back door. She finished cleaning the saloon in a daze, her mind already racing ahead to this new chapter of her life that was about to begin. By the time Austin arrived with the wagon, Clara had packed her few belongings into a single battered trunk and paid Mrs. Patterson what she owed. The elderly woman had raised her eyebrows when Clara explained she was leaving to work at the Riverside Ranch, but she had not tried to talk her out of it. If anything, Mrs. Patterson seemed relieved, probably glad to have one less controversial figure staying under her roof. The ride out to the ranch took nearly 2 hours, following a rough trail that wound through scrubland dotted with saguaro cacti and mesquite trees. Austin drove the wagon with the easy competence of someone comfortable with horses and open spaces, occasionally pointing out landmarks or explaining his plans for the ranch. He wanted to start with cattle, he told her, building up a modest herd that could be driven to market in Tucson. The property had good water access from a creek that ran through the eastern edge of the land, fed by underground springs that rarely ran dry, even in the driest months. Clara listened more than she spoke, taking in this man who had offered her a lifeline when everyone else in town seemed content to watch her slowly drown. He was young, she realized, probably not more than 26 or 27, only a few years older than her own 23. There was something solid about him, a quiet strength that did not need to announce itself. He did not fill the silence with empty chatter, seemed comfortable letting stretches of quiet fall between them as the wagon rolled across the desert landscape. The ranch, when it finally came into view, was more substantial than Clara had expected. The main house was a sturdy adobe structure with a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides, providing shade from the relentless Arizona sun. There was a barn that had seen better days but appeared structurally sound, a couple of smaller outbuildings, and a network of corrals that needed repair but showed promise. Everything had the look of a place that had once been cared for and could be again with enough work and attention. Austin helped Clara down from the wagon and carried her trunk onto the porch. "Let me show you around inside," he said, pushing open the heavy wooden door. The interior was dim and cool, the thick adobe walls keeping out the worst of the heat. There was a main living area with a large stone fireplace, a kitchen with a cast iron stove that looked relatively new, and 3 bedrooms opening off a central hallway. Austin led her to the smallest of these, a corner room with a window that looked out toward the creek. "This would be your room," he said, setting her trunk down near the simple iron bed frame. "There is a lock on the door and I want you to use it. I meant what I said about keeping everything proper and respectful. You have every right to your privacy and I will not intrude on it." Clara walked to the window, looking out at the view of green trees marking the creek's path through the brown landscape. "Where will you sleep?" "Master bedroom is at the other end of the house," Austin replied. "You will not be disturbed, I give you my word." She turned to face him, studying his earnest expression. "Why are you doing this? And please, do not insult my intelligence by pretending it is only about needing a housekeeper. You could have found someone without a scandalous reputation if that was all you wanted." Austin was quiet for a long moment, his hat turning slowly in his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but clear. "6 months ago, I was mustered out of the cavalry. I had served 5 years, seen things that still wake me up at night sometimes. When I came back to try to build a civilian life, people treated me different. Some thanked me for my service, sure, but others looked at me like I was broken, like the things I had done and seen made me something less than a full person. It did not matter that I had survived, that I was trying to build something good. All they could see was what they thought I must be, based on assumptions and judgment." He met her eyes directly. "When the sheriff told me about you, about how the town treated you, I recognized that same situation. Everybody had decided who you were based on gossip and assumption, not on the actual truth of your character. I figured you deserved a chance to be judged on your own merits, same as I wish more people had done for me." Clara felt something crack open inside her chest, some protective shell she had built around herself beginning to fracture. This man understood. He actually understood what it felt like to be dismissed and diminished by people who knew nothing about the real you. "I do not need your pity," she said, but there was no heat in the words. "Good, because I am not offering any," Austin replied. "I am offering a job and a fair deal. What you make of it is up to you. Now, how about I give you some time to settle in, and then we can discuss the details of how we will make this arrangement work?" Clara nodded, not trusting her voice to remain steady. Austin left, closing the door softly behind him, and she sat down on the edge of the narrow bed. Through the window, she could hear the sound of him unhitching the horses, the low murmur of his voice as he spoke to the animals. She closed her eyes and allowed herself, for the first time in months, to feel something that might have been hope. The first few weeks at the ranch fell into a rhythm that surprised Clara with its comfort. She woke each morning before sunrise to start breakfast, cooking eggs and bacon and fresh bread on the cast iron stove that she quickly learned to manage. Austin was always up before her, having already tended to the horses and checked on the small herd of cattle he was beginning to build. They ate breakfast together at the worn kitchen table, conversation sparse but not uncomfortable, before going their separate ways to handle the day's tasks. Clara's work was demanding but satisfying in a way her previous jobs had never been. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, scrubbing away years of neglect until the adobe walls gleamed and the wood floors shone with polish. She discovered she had a talent for making curtains, cutting up old sheets and fabric scraps Austin had found in the barn to create window coverings that softened the stark interior. She planted a small vegetable garden near the creek, carrying water in buckets to coax tomatoes and squash and beans from the Arizona soil. Austin, for his part, was true to his word about respecting her privacy and treating her with decorum. He was unfailingly polite, always knocking before entering a room she might be in, never presuming to invade her space or make demands beyond the work they had agreed upon. He paid her wages on time, counting out the coins and bills into her hand each week without fail. But despite the professional nature of their arrangement, Clara found herself becoming increasingly aware of Austin as more than just an employer. She noticed the way he was patient with the horses, speaking to them in a low, soothing voice when they were skittish. She saw how he worked from dawn until dusk repairing fences and buildings, his shirt dark with sweat, but never complaining about the heat or the labor. She heard him sometimes at night, through the thick adobe walls, pacing in his room when the nightmares he had mentioned came calling. One evening, about a month after she had arrived at the ranch, Clara was preparing dinner when she heard raised voices outside. She moved to the window and saw Austin standing near the barn talking to two men on horseback. Even from a distance, she could tell the conversation was not friendly. The visitors were gesturing aggressively, and Austin had his hand resting on the pistol at his hip in a way that suggested he was prepared to use it if necessary. Clara's heart began to pound. She grabbed the rifle Austin had shown her how to use shortly after she arrived, a precaution he insisted on given their isolation. She did not go outside, but she positioned herself near the door where she could see and react if needed. After several tense minutes, the two men rode off, their horses kicking up dust as they galloped away. Austin stood watching them go before turning and heading back toward the house. His face was tight with anger or worry. Clara could not tell which. What was that about? She asked as he came inside. Austin removed his hat and ran a hand through his hair. Problems with a neighboring rancher. Man named Dutch Porter who has been trying to buy this land since before I purchased it. He is not happy that I refused his latest offer, implied that accidents can happen to folks who are stubborn. Clara felt a chill despite the evening heat. Is he dangerous? Dangerous enough, Austin admitted, but I am not selling. This ranch is my future, my chance to build something that matters. I will not be run off by threats and intimidation. What if he makes good on those threats? Clara asked quietly. Austin looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Then I will deal with it. But Clara, I need you to know that if you want to go back to town, I will understand. I will not hold you to our agreement if being here puts you in danger. It was the first time he had used her given name, and hearing it in his low, serious voice did something strange to her insides. I am not going anywhere, she said firmly. You gave me a chance when no one else would. I am not going to abandon you at the first sign of trouble. A smile touched the corner of Austin's mouth. You are stronger than people give you credit for, you know that. So are you, Clara replied and meant it. From that day forward, something shifted between them. The careful professional distance they had maintained began to erode, replaced by something warmer and more genuine. They started talking more during meals, sharing stories about their pasts. Austin told her about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, about joining the cavalry to see the world and escape the expectations of his father, who had wanted him to become a shopkeeper. Clara told him about her brief marriage to a man she had barely known, about how he had promised her security but delivered only debt and disappointment, about his death in a mining accident that had left her alone and vulnerable to the predatory gossip that had destroyed her reputation. You deserved better, Austin said after she finished her story one evening. They were sitting on the porch watching the sun set over the desert, the sky ablaze with color. You deserved someone who would protect you and provide for you and treat you with the respect you are owed. Clara looked over at him, at the strong profile outlined against the fading light. Most people seem to think I got exactly what I deserved. That is what damaged goods are for, after all, used up and worthless. Austin turned to face her fully, his expression intense. You are not damaged goods, Clara. You are not used up or worthless or any of those other things small-minded people say. You are brave and strong and capable, and anyone who cannot see that is a fool. Her throat tightened with emotion. You barely know me. I know enough, he said quietly. I know you work harder than anyone I have ever met. I know you have faced terrible hardship and kept going anyway. I know you have every reason to be bitter and angry at the world, but instead you plant gardens and make curtains and cook meals that turn this house into something that feels like a home. I know enough, Clara. She wanted to believe him. More than that, She was starting to think she might be falling in love with him, this quiet cowboy who saw her as whole when the rest of the world insisted she was broken. But fear held her back, the fear that trusting again would only lead to more pain. "Thank you," she whispered, not knowing what else to say. Austin reached over and gently took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. "You do not have to thank me for telling the truth." They sat like that as darkness fell over the ranch, hands linked, neither of them speaking but both of them feeling the connection growing between them like something alive and inevitable. The next few weeks brought both progress and problems. Austin's herd was growing as he purchased more cattle from ranchers willing to deal with him, and Clara's garden was flourishing, providing fresh vegetables that improved their meals immensely. But Dutch Porter remained a constant threat, his men riding near the property boundaries, occasionally cutting fences or spooking cattle. It was clear he was trying to make life difficult enough that Austin would give up and sell. Austin refused to be intimidated, but Clara could see the stress wearing on him. He slept less, spent more time riding the property lines checking for damage or signs of intrusion. She worried about him, this man who had given her a chance at a new life, and who was now fighting to protect his own dreams against someone who wanted to take them away. One afternoon, while Clara was working in the garden, she heard the sound of multiple horses approaching. She straightened, shading her eyes against the sun, and felt her stomach drop when she recognized Dutch Porter riding at the head of a group of 5 men. She quickly gathered her skirts and ran toward the house, calling for Austin. He emerged from the barn, saw the approaching riders, and his face went hard. "Get inside," he told Clara. "Lock the door and get the rifle ready. Do not come out unless I tell you to." "Austin, there are too many of them," Clara protested. "I said get inside," he repeated, his voice brooking no argument. Clara reluctantly obeyed, but she positioned herself at the window with the rifle where she could see what was happening. Her hands were shaking as she watched Dutch Porter and his men rein in near the porch where Austin stood waiting. Porter was a thick-set man in his 50s, with a florid face and cold eyes. "Sawyer," he said, not bothering with pleasantries, "I am making you one final offer. $5,000 for this property. That is more than fair, more than you paid for it. Take the money and move on while you still can." "I told you before, Porter. I am not selling," Austin replied, his voice calm but firm. "This is my land, legally purchased and paid for. You need to leave." Porter leaned forward in his saddle, his expression darkening. "You are making a mistake, boy. I tried to be reasonable, but you are too stubborn for your own good. And that woman you have staying here, that Bennett woman, do you really think having her around is going to help your reputation? People already talk about what must be going on out here, a single man and a woman of her background." Clara felt her face flush hot with anger and shame, but Austin's voice cut through the desert air like a whip. "You will not speak about Miss Bennett. Her character is beyond reproach, and any man who suggests otherwise will answer to me personally." Porter laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Defending a whore now, Sawyer. You are even more pathetic than I thought. Last chance. Take the money or face the consequences." "Get off my land," Austin said coldly. "Now." For a moment, Clara thought Porter might do something violent. His hand moved toward his gun, and his men shifted in their saddles, clearly ready to follow his lead. But then Porter seemed to think better of it. He spat in the dirt and wheeled his horse around. "You will regret this, Sawyer," he called over his shoulder. "Both of you will regret this." Clara watched them ride away, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. When they were finally out of sight, she set down the rifle and went outside to where Austin still stood on the porch, his body tense with barely controlled anger. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for defending me." Austin turned to her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "I meant every word, Clara. You are not what they say you are. You are good and decent and worthy of respect, and I will fight anyone who says different." Something broke loose inside her then, all the protective barriers she had built around her heart crumbling in the face of his fierce defense. She stepped closer to him, reached up and gently touched his face. "Austin, I need you to know something. This place, working here with you, it is the first time since my husband died that I have felt safe. The first time I have felt like maybe I could be more than just the damaged goods everyone says I am. You did that. You gave me that gift." His hand came up to cover hers where it rested against his cheek. "You were always more than that, Clara. I just gave you a place where you could see it for yourself." "I think I am falling in love with you," she whispered, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "I know that is probably not appropriate, given that you are my employer and I am supposed to be your housekeeper, but I cannot help it. You are the kindest, strongest, most honorable man I have ever known, and I cannot stop thinking about you." For one terrible moment, Austin just stared at her, and Clara's heart sank. She had ruined everything, exposed feelings that were clearly one-sided, destroyed the comfortable arrangement they had built. But then Austin smiled, a genuine, warm smile that transformed his entire face. "Thank God," he said, and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that stole what little breath she had left. Clara melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck as she kissed him back with all the pent-up longing and hope and fear she had been carrying. His lips were warm and gentle and demanding all at once, and she felt like she was finally coming home to a place she belonged. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Austin pressed his forehead against hers. "I have been half in love with you since the day I met you in town," he admitted. "I have been fighting it because I did not want to take advantage of you, did not want you to feel pressured or obligated because I employed you. But Clara, if you feel even a fraction of what I feel for you, I would like to start courting you properly. I would like to see if maybe this thing between us could turn into something permanent." "Yes," Clara said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I would like that very much." They spent the evening on the porch, talking and holding hands and stealing kisses like teenagers, building plans for a future that suddenly seemed bright with possibility. Austin wanted to expand the ranch, maybe add some horses to their operation. Clara wanted to continue building up the house, making it a real home rather than just a place to sleep. They both wanted a life together, a partnership built on mutual respect and genuine love, but their happiness was short-lived. 2 days after their declaration of feelings, Clara woke in the middle of the night to the smell of smoke. She bolted out of bed, threw on her robe and ran into the hallway to find Austin already up and heading for the front door. "The barn," he said grimly. "It is on fire." They ran outside together into a nightmare of orange flames and black smoke. The barn was fully engulfed, the old wood burning like kindling in the dry night air. The horses were screaming in terror from the corral, and Austin immediately ran toward them, releasing the gate so they could flee the heat and smoke. "Porter did this," Austin shouted over the roar of the flames. "This is his consequence." Clara helped him move the cattle away from the burning structure, then ran to the creek with buckets, trying desperately to save what she could. But it was hopeless. By the time the barn collapsed into itself in a shower of sparks, there was nothing left but smoking ruins and ash. Austin stood watching the destruction, his face illuminated by the dying flames, looking more defeated than Clara had ever seen him. She went to him and wrapped her arms around him from behind, pressing her face against his back. "We will rebuild," she said firmly. "We will rebuild and we will not let him win." Austin turned in her arms and held her tight. He destroyed months of work, all the feed for the winter, the equipment, everything I had stored there. Clara, I do not know if I can afford to rebuild and keep the ranch going. He might have actually won. No, Clara said fiercely. No, he has not won. We have each other and we have this land and we have the determination to keep fighting. That is more than enough. Austin looked down at her, and despite everything, he smiled. How did I get so lucky as to find you? I think I am the lucky one, Clara replied. Now, let us figure out what we need to do next. The next morning, after a sleepless night spent watching the embers and making sure the fire did not spread, Austin rode into Apache Junction to report the arson to the sheriff. Clara stayed at the ranch, beginning the work of salvaging what little could be saved from the wreckage. She was dragging out a partially burned saddle when she heard horses approaching again. Her heart sank, thinking it might be Porter coming to gloat, but when she looked up, she saw Austin returning with not only the sheriff but also a dozen other men from town, all of them with wagons loaded with lumber and supplies. Austin climbed down from his horse and came to her, his eyes bright with emotion. When I told the sheriff what happened, word spread through town. These men, they all contributed materials and offered to help rebuild. Said it was not right what Porter did, and they wanted to make it clear they do not stand with him. Clara felt tears spring to her eyes as the men began unloading their wagons, setting up to begin construction on a new barn. Even more surprising, two women climbed down from one of the wagons, women Clara recognized from church services she had occasionally attended. They came toward her carrying baskets of food. Miss Bennett, one of them said, a woman named Sarah Miller who had never spoken to her before. We brought some food for the workers, and we wanted to apologize. Some of us in town have treated you poorly based on gossip and assumption. What Austin said about you, about your character and your work ethic, it made us realize we were wrong. We would like to make amends if you will let us. Clara was so shocked she could barely speak. Austin put his hand on her shoulder, a supportive, loving gesture that did not go unnoticed by the gathered crowd. Clara is going to be my wife, he announced, his voice carrying across the yard. We have not set a date yet, but when we do, I hope all of you will help us celebrate. She is the best thing that ever happened to me, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure she knows how valued and loved she is. There were nods and smiles from the assembled group, and Clara felt something heavy lift from her chest. Not everyone had come around, she knew. There were still people in town who would judge and condemn her. But enough had changed their minds that she no longer felt completely isolated and ostracized. She had Austin, and now she had at least some allies, and that was more than she had dared to hope for just a few months ago. The barn reconstruction took 3 days, with men working from dawn until dusk to build a structure even better than the one that had burned. Women brought food and water, and even some of the children helped by cleaning up debris and organizing supplies. It became something of a community event, people rallying around Austin and Clara in a way that made Clara's heart swell with gratitude. On the 3rd evening, as the last nails were being hammered into place, the sheriff arrived with Dutch Porter in handcuffs. Austin and Clara stopped what they were doing to listen, as the lawman explained that one of Porter's own men had confessed to setting the fire, unable to live with the guilt. Porter was going to stand trial for arson and intimidation, and with the testimony against him, he would likely spend years in prison. Your ranch is safe now, Sawyer, the sheriff said. Porter will not be bothering you again. Austin shook the sheriff's hand gratefully, then turned to Clara and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed with relief and joy. When he set her down, he kissed her soundly in front of everyone, and there were cheers and catcalls from the assembled crowd. "Marry me," Austin said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Right now, today, I do not want to wait another minute to make you my wife." Clara laughed, tears streaming down her face. "We do not have a preacher here, you fool." "Actually, we do," one of the men called out. "Reverend Thompson came with us today. He is inside the house getting out of the heat." Austin grinned and called for the Reverend, who emerged looking confused but willing. "Reverend, would you be willing to perform a marriage ceremony right now?" The elderly preacher smiled. "I suppose I could do that. Do you have a witness?" "We have dozens," Austin replied, gesturing to the crowd that had helped rebuild his barn. And so, on a warm Arizona evening in June of 1882, covered in dust and sweat from 3 days of hard labor, with a crowd of neighbors and former strangers as witnesses, Clara Bennett married Austin Sawyer. She wore the simple dress she had been working in all day, and he wore his dusty ranch clothes, and neither of them cared one bit about the lack of ceremony or fine clothing. All that mattered was the love in Austin's eyes as he slipped a simple gold band on her finger, a ring he had purchased weeks earlier in the hope that she might one day agree to be his wife. "I love you, Clara Sawyer," he said when the Reverend pronounced them married. "And I will spend every day of the rest of my life showing you that you are everything, not damaged goods, never damaged goods." "I love you too," Clara replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved me, Austin. You saw past all the lies and judgment and saw me for who I really am." "No," Austin said gently, framing her face with his hands. "I just gave you a safe place to show the world who you always were. You saved yourself, Clara. You are the strongest person I know." They kissed as husband and wife for the first time, and the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Someone produced a fiddle, and suddenly there was music and dancing, an impromptu celebration under the stars. Clara danced with her new husband, feeling lighter and freer than she had in years, surrounded by people who had decided to give her a second chance. Later, after the guests had finally departed and they were alone in the house that was now truly their home, Austin carried Clara across the threshold of what had been his bedroom and was now theirs. He set her down gently on the bed and knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "I know this all happened fast," he said, "and I know we still have a lot to learn about each other, but Clara, I meant every word I said. You are my partner, my equal, the woman I want to build a life with. Whatever comes, we will face it together." Clara pulled him up onto the bed beside her, wrapping her arms around him. "I never thought I would get a second chance at happiness," she whispered. "I thought my life was over after my husband died and the town turned against me. But then you came along and saw something in me worth saving. You gave me hope, Austin. You gave me a future." "We gave each other a future," Austin corrected, kissing her softly. "And it is going to be beautiful, I promise you that." They made love for the first time that night, gentle and tender, and filled with all the emotion they had been holding back for months. Clara felt cherished and desired and loved in a way she had never experienced before, and she poured all of her own love and gratitude into every touch and kiss. By the time they finally fell asleep in each other's arms as the sun began to rise over the desert, she knew with absolute certainty that she had found where she belonged. The following months were filled with hard work and deep contentment. Austin and Clara worked side by side to build up the ranch, expanding the herd and improving the property. They traveled to Tucson twice, once to sell cattle and once to purchase supplies, and each time Austin made sure everyone they encountered knew that Clara was his beloved wife, treating her with a respect and pride that slowly changed how others saw her. The gossip that had once followed her began to fade, replaced by a reputation as a hard-working, devoted wife and a woman of strong character. In the fall, Clara discovered she was pregnant. Austin was over the moon with joy, treating her like precious glass, despite her insistence that she was perfectly capable of continuing her work. They spent the evenings talking about their future child, making plans and dreaming dreams. The winter was mild that year, and in early March of 1883, Clara gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named James. Austin held his son with tears streaming down his face, overcome with emotion at this new life they had created together. "He is perfect," Austin whispered, looking at Clara with such love it made her heart ache. "You are perfect. How did I get so blessed?" "We both got blessed," Clara replied, exhausted but happy. "We found each other when we both needed it most." As she watched Austin cradle their newborn son, Clara thought back to the desperate, lonely woman she had been just a year earlier, convinced that her life was effectively over. She thought about the cowboy who had seen past her reputation to the woman underneath, who had offered her a chance when everyone else had written her off. They said she was damaged goods, but Austin Sawyer had seen a woman who deserved everything. And because he believed in her, she had learned to believe in herself again. The years that followed were filled with both challenges and joys, as all lives are. The ranch prospered, growing into one of the most successful operations in the area. Austin and Clara had 3 more children, 2 daughters named Elizabeth and Margaret, and another son named Thomas. They built a larger house to accommodate their growing family, but they kept the original adobe structure, the place where their love story had truly begun. Dutch Porter eventually died in prison, unrepentant to the end. Some people in Apache Junction never fully accepted Clara, never let go of the old gossip, but most came around once they saw the life she and Austin built together, the family they raised with love and respect. Clara became known not as the scandalous widow, but as the woman who ran a successful ranch alongside her husband, who raised fine children, and who helped anyone who needed it regardless of their past. She never forgot what it felt like to be judged and condemned, so she made it her mission to offer grace and second chances whenever she could. Austin kept his promise to spend every day showing Clara how valued and loved she was. He never took her for granted, never let her forget that she was the center of his world. When their children asked how their parents met, Austin would tell them the story of a lonely cowboy who found the most extraordinary woman working in a town that did not deserve her, and how love had transformed both their lives. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1902, Austin and Clara sat on the porch of their home watching the sunset, much as they had done on the evening when they first admitted their feelings for each other. Their children were inside preparing a celebratory dinner, and they could hear laughter and conversation drifting through the open windows. "You ever regret it?" Clara asked, leaning against her husband's shoulder. "Taking a chance on me all those years ago?" Austin pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Not for one single second. You are the best decision I ever made, Clara. You and our children and this life we built. It is more than I ever dreamed possible." "I love you, Austin Sawyer," Clara said, the same words she had spoken so many times over the years but which never lost their meaning. "I love you too, Clara Sawyer," Austin replied. "My wife, my partner, my everything, always and forever." As the Arizona sky blazed with color, and their family gathered inside the home they had built together, Clara thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. She had been broken and lost, labeled as damaged and worthless by people who did not know her at all. But Austin had seen through the lies to the truth underneath, had offered her not pity but respect, not charity but genuine partnership. Together, They had proven that love could heal even the deepest wounds, that second chances were possible, and that the labels others put on us do not have to define who we are. Clara Bennett had been called damaged goods, but Austin Sawyer had seen a woman who deserved everything. And in giving her a chance to prove herself, he had received everything in return. Their love story became legend in Apache Junction, told and retold by those who had witnessed its beginning and marveled at its endurance. It was a reminder that judgment and gossip have no power over truth. That character is revealed not in our worst moments but in how we rise from them, and that sometimes the most broken-looking people are actually the strongest of all. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, and the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Austin and Clara stood and went inside to join their family. Behind them, the desert stretched out endless and beautiful, witness to a love that had transformed two lonely souls into something whole and beautiful and enduring. They had started with nothing but hope and determination, a damaged reputation and a lonely cowboy's dream. They had built a life that mattered, a family that thrived, and a love that would last until the end of their days and beyond. And in the end, that was more than enough. It was everything. The years continued to unfold with the gentle rhythm of a life well lived, bringing new grandchildren and continued prosperity. Austin and Clara grew old together, their love deepening rather than fading with time. When Austin finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72 in 1928, Clara held his hand and whispered her thanks for a life more beautiful than she had ever imagined possible. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren who adored her, before joining Austin wherever souls go when this life is done. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, under the wide Arizona sky they had both loved so much. And if you visit Apache Junction today and talk to the old-timers, some of them can still tell you the story of Clara and Austin Sawyer, the woman everyone said was damaged goods, and the lonely cowboy who saw her true worth. It is a story about love, redemption, and the courage to believe in second chances, a story that reminds us all that we are never truly broken beyond repair, that there is always hope for those brave enough to reach for it. Their legacy lived on not just in the descendants who carried their names and their values forward, but in the very heart of the community they had helped build. The ranch eventually passed to their children, and then their grandchildren, each generation adding their own chapter to the story while honoring the foundation laid by Clara and Austin. In the small cemetery on the edge of Apache Junction, their graves became a place where young couples would sometimes visit before their weddings, touching the weathered headstones and asking for the kind of enduring love Clara and Austin had shared. The inscription Austin had chosen for their shared monument was simple but profound. They said she was broken. He saw she was whole. Together they built everything. And in the end, that was the truth of their story. Not that Austin had saved Clara, but that they had saved each other. Two people who had been judged and dismissed by others finding in each other the acceptance and love they both deserved. They had proven that our past does not define our future, that damaged is just a word people use when they cannot see someone's true strength, and that love, real love, sees not what was or what might have been, but what is and what can be. Clara Bennett had walked into Apache Junction as a widow with a destroyed reputation and no prospects. She had left this world as Clara Sawyer, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and proof that every person deserves a chance to show who they really are. Austin had been the catalyst for her transformation, but she had done the actual work of reclaiming her life and her identity. Together, They had created something beautiful and lasting that continued to inspire long after they were gone. Their story was complete, their love fulfilled, their legacy secured in the memories and lives of those they left behind. And somewhere in the Arizona desert, where the wind still whispers through the mesquite and the creek still flows through Riverside Ranch, the spirit of their love remains, a testament to the power of seeing past judgment to truth, past brokenness to wholeness, past what was to what could be. They had lived fully, loved completely, and left the world better than they found it. And that, in the end, was the happiest ending of all.